Trails of Cold Steel, a game that I constantly glanced over when I was searching Steam for new games to play. It's one of those games that you look at the store page, say it looks interesting, but constantly overlook it. Then the day came that I finally played it, and Trails of Cold Steel was not only fun, but profound. And as you can see from the title of this video, this game is profound on a subject that is very touchy. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a JRPG from 2013 have something profound to say about prejudice? Well, it all starts with the story of a young woman who wanted to be a knight, Laura Arcide. In order to understand Laura, we need to understand where she comes from. Laura grew up in Legram, a lakeside town with a deep history from the War of the Lions. While Legram has a little lakeside dock, on the other side of the lake is a giant castle called Lohengrin Castle. Though Lohengrin Castle is much older than the War of the Lions, it served as the headquarters to St. Leanne Sandlot, also known as the Lance Maiden. The Lance Maiden played a massive role in the War of the Lions and the creation of the Erebonia Empire. Suffice it to say, the Lance Maiden is the embodiment of the honorable knight as an ideal. There is a statue of the Lance Maiden at the main docks in Legram, and kneeling before the Lance Maiden are statues of two other knights, one of which is a relative of Laura from 10 generations ago. But Laura's connection to noble knights isn't just ancient history. Her dad is the Viscount of Legram and runs the Arcide School of Swordsmanship. Being the daughter of the Radiant Blade Master, Laura's childhood was one of immense privilege. But just because she was privileged did not mean that she was entitled. Because of her father's teachings, Laura learned the importance of honor and discipline from a young age. She earned the respect of both the commoners and nobles in Legram, and it's not because of her title. And unlike many other characters at Thor's military academy, Laura values people on their merits, not their birthrights. So why talk about Laura? Why would I talk about someone who's so upright in a video about prejudice? It's because Laura's view of the world will be challenged by one classmate who defies everything she has been taught, Fie Clausel. Compared to the disciplined and altruistic Laura, Fie seems lazy and is always looking to take a nap. To give you an idea of how lazy she seems, Fie joined the gardening club so that she would have an excuse to do nothing. But don't let Fie's affinity for naps fool you, as she is one of the strongest fighters in the entire military academy. Whenever you win a battle with Fie dealing the decisive blow, she yawns at the end of it. And not only that, Fie surpasses most of her classmates in combat despite being several years below the minimum age to attend Thor's military academy. Even on the first day of school, when their instructor used a trap door to send her classmates into a dungeon filled with monsters, Fie showed her resourcefulness by using a grappling hook to avoid falling down the trap door. In other words, Fie only does as much effort as she needs to, and if she doesn't think something is worth her time, she won't do it. While there is an argument to be made that Fie has some growing up to do, it certainly pales in comparison to the immature antics of many of her classmates at this point in the story. And for the most part, Class 7 is content to leave Fie to her own devices since they don't have nearly as strong of an opinion towards her as they do towards some of their other classmates. Even Laura, who's always looking out for others, focuses more on people like Green early in the story because they clearly have some growing up to do. In the very first field study, Laura pulls Reen aside and tells him to stop holding back. In other words, Laura recognizes that Reen needs to grow and is willing to actively encourage him in a positive but forceful way. She takes after her father by being firm but fair with her guidance, and makes sure to do so away from the others so as not to embarrass Reen. And that's how Laura is for much of the early part of Trails of Cold Steel. Firm but fair, until some information about the past of one of her classmates comes to light. Before the field study in Heimdall, it is revealed that Fie was formerly a mercenary for the Zephyr Jaeger Corps. And the moment Laura learned this, everything changed. Remember how I said Laura was always firm but fair? Well, before the trip to Heimdall, there is a mandatory swim lesson for all of Class 7. As military officer students, swimming is useful, but definitely not the most important skill, and knowing how to swim effectively is unlikely to be the difference between life and death. And yet, in front of the entire class, Laura calls out Fie and says that she isn't trying hard enough. Now, at first glance, this might seem like, oh look, Laura's being firm but fair, just like she was with Reen, right? But look at the context here. When Reen was having a hard time and not realizing it, Laura took Reen to the side and talked to him in private first. Here, however, Fie has done nothing to antagonize Laura, and yet Laura has the audacity to call Fie out in front of everybody. Following this outburst, Fee decides to give it all she's got and show just how fast she really is. It is a close race that Laura wins by a hair. But again, looking at the situation, it seems completely asynchronous at this point. Why yell at someone for a swim lesson? Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe Laura was having a bad day and took her frustrations out on Fee at random. After all, Laura yells at Monica later in the day about how they are swimming, so why am I focusing so heavily on Laura's outburst towards Fee? While it is true that Laura yells at Monica over their swimming, she does so far away from other people and immediately apologizes when she realizes that her behavior was inappropriate. In contrast, Laura lashed out at Fee in front of her entire class and refused to apologize, instead telling Fee that it seems we truly cannot find a middle ground. Although Laura treated Fee horribly during the swim lesson, maybe it's just an isolated incident? Even the best of us make mistakes, so maybe Laura made a careless mistake? Except, it isn't isolated or a mistake. After the swim lesson, if you try to take Laura and Fee on the same team to explore the old schoolhouse for a main story mission, Laura refuses to join the team. And when Sarah assigns Laura and Fee to the same team for a practical exam, Laura crosses her arms and turns away from Fee in displeasure. Far from being an isolated incident, Laura is constantly disrespectful and dismissive towards Fee, no matter what Fee does. But the thing is, Laura is the kind of person to teach people to be their best selves, so why is she being so unreasonable with Fee even when Fee tried her best? In other words, Laura's behavior towards Fee does not match how she's been behaving to everyone up to this point. In fact, it doesn't even match how she was behaving towards Fee before they found out that Fee was a mercenary. So what gives? The moment she learns that Fee is a mercenary, Laura becomes victim to her own experiences. Having grown up in Legram, where she learned about honor and discipline, Laura has likely heard stories about mercenaries. And to someone like Laura, who grew up in a place where people train every day to serve others in battle, any person that has no allegiance to anyone except the highest bidder is despicable. To Laura, fighting is a duty, but the way she was raised in her environment, she has been taught to think that for mercenaries, fighting is a job and nothing more. In other words, mercenaries are not disciplined, they only want money. Mercenaries cannot have honor, they only do it for themselves. This right here is what prejudice looks like, or more accurately, unconscious bias. Everyone has biases based off of the environments they grow up in and exist in. Having biases by itself does not make you a bad person. We are humans. We like things that are familiar and are afraid of things that are not. However, the thing about unconscious bias is that if it is left unquestioned and unchallenged, it can cause good people to commit bad actions without realizing why they're doing it. This is exactly what is happening with Laura, and her words reinforce that her behavior is the result of unconscious bias. If you talk to Laura during a free time event after the swim lesson, Laura says the following: "Alyssa told me that, as Fee's elder, I shouldn't let my emotions get to me so much. That's a perfectly reasonable expectation, but I find myself failing to do so time after time." Laura knows her behavior towards Fee is unreasonable, but Laura also has unconscious bias towards mercenaries. Because Laura sees Fee as a mercenary, she associates all of the negative things about mercenaries that was reinforced upon her from a young age. As a result, Laura is disrespectful and dismissive of Fee even when Laura knows that her behavior is unreasonable. And the more Laura behaves this way, the more Fee does not want to be around her either. Now, you might think, oh well, they're still teenagers. Maybe they'll work this out like it's no big deal, right? So what if Laura had these outbursts towards Fee? They're still young. They just need to grow up, right? Surely there's no harm with these aggressions, right? Except, it's that very thought process that causes the greatest harm and why prejudice can be so difficult to deal with. During the Heimdallr field study, after many episodes of microaggressions and outbursts between Laura and Fee, the player finds themselves fighting some slimes in a sewer for one of their missions. During combat in Trails of Cold Steel, there's an important gameplay mechanic called Arcus links. Arcus links are effectively bonds you form with specific members of your team in order to do follow-up attacks or actions. For example, an Arcus link to allow an ally to make an attack on the same turn as a different character, effectively dealing twice the damage in one turn. The Arcus links are decided by the player, and making the best use of Arcus links is a key part of the battle strategies in Trails of Cold Steel. Because Arcus links are so important, and because follow-up attacks is one of the most common reasons to use Arcus links, most players at this point in the game will choose Laura and Fee for an Arcus link since they are the strongest characters available for this chapter. And during this fight with the slimes, their Arcus link breaks. So the thing about Arcus links is that it's a gameplay mechanic that is introduced to you very early. You've unlocked it, so you should be able to use it. But in this case, the game takes the Arcus link away from you and doesn't let you have it back for these two specific characters. In other words, for anyone who thought that prejudice isn't a big deal, this is the moment where the prejudice that Laura has towards Fee, and vice versa, is felt by the player. Prejudice creates silos, and silos limit our potential. And in this moment, in a brilliant stroke of game design, Trails of Cold Steel is making the player experience the limit of that potential by taking away the potential of your two strongest characters. After the fight with the slimes, Laura and Fee come up to Reen with an expression of sadness on their faces. They asked Reen to keep them separated for the rest of the field study, thinking that it is clear that they cannot perform when they are near each other. Remember how I said that unconscious bias to make good people do bad things? This is a prime example. Imagine if, in addition to Arcus links, Fee and Laura could not be equipped in the same party for the rest of the field study. Imagine how awful it would be to not have your two best attackers available on the same team for the rest of the field study when there are some difficult bosses coming up. It may seem like such a little subtle thing, but prejudice keeps us separated from each other in a way that is far more powerful than overt acts of racism, classism, or sexism because of its subtlety. But Reen said no. Being a young leader who is trying to make Class 7 reach its full potential, Reen tells Laura and Fee that they need to work this out. Now, for much of the rest of this section of the field study, you still cannot have Fee and Laura use an Arcus link. The gap is still there. Is prejudice insurmountable? If it's so subtle and so ingrained, will we never be able to use Laura and Fee together again? Well, remember when I said that Trails of Cold Steel has something profound to say on this subject? That's because it not only has, in my opinion, the best portrayal of prejudice that I've seen in any video game because of how realistic it is, it also shows us what to do about it. In order to break free of prejudice and unconscious bias, those who are experiencing it have to be willing to reach out and expand their point of view. Most importantly, they have to be willing to be vulnerable, willing to reflect, and see that their worldview might have been a narrow one, and that's a scary thing. Later in the field study, at a point where Laura and Fee are so frustrated with each other that they are literally leaning against a fence with angry faces, Laura asks Fee if she wants to spar with her in the park. But for this sparring match, Laura makes one request. If she wins, she wants Fee to tell her the story of her childhood. To everyone's surprise, Fee accepts these conditions. This is showing the first step to breaking through prejudice, which is finding some common ground and using it as a means to interact. Since Laura wants to be a knight and Fee was a mercenary, they both like to fight, and that's something they can connect on. It's a common interest. A lengthy sparring match ensues between the two of them, and by the end of it, both are on the ground exhausted. Reen and Machias, who were asked to watch the match to make sure nothing got out of hand, agree that the fight was a draw. However, Fee concedes the battle with the argument that they fought at nighttime and she has the advantage in nighttime. While some might think that this is a question of battlefield tactics, I would argue that this is an example of the second step to overcoming prejudice, being willing to share your experiences. Just as Laura had unconscious biases towards mercenaries, Fee has unconscious biases towards those who lived a more privileged life. And just as Laura was willing to try and learn about Fee, Fee was willing to open up about herself to Laura. And so Fee told the story of her childhood. She was an orphan and adopted by the leader of the Zephyr Mercenary Corps. The mercenaries treated her like family and kept her in the camp when she was young so that she would be safe. And as she grew older, Fee wanted to do more for her family, so they taught her how to fight. But when the day came that Zephyr fought a rival mercenary corps, the Red Constellation, in a brutal battle, most of her family died, and she was left an orphan once again. Fee was once again an orphan, but this time, she had known loss. She wandered aimlessly for a long time. Someone so young, yet so capable, and so very alone. Until instructor Sarah brought her to Thor's military academy so that she might find a new place to call home. And it's at this moment that Laura cries. The story of Fee's life was not all what she had been taught, and in many ways, the way that Fee had been loved by those in her mercenary corps mirrored the way that Laura had been loved by her father and her town. This is the third and most important part of overcoming prejudice. Being willing to admit that you might have more to learn. Being willing to admit that you don't know everything. Laura admits to Fee that her view of the world has been a narrow one, and that she has a lot of growing to do, more than she ever realized. Now, if the game had just left it at this point and everything went back to normal, it would be a great story, even a great segment in the video game, but it wouldn't be profound. But just when it seems like everything's about to go back to normal, Laura helps Fee up and then challenges Reen and Machias to a duel. But when the duel starts, you aren't playing as Reen, you're playing as Laura. Just as the game took away the Arcus link from Laura and Fee to make you feel the effects of prejudice, in this moment, Trails of Cold Steel completely breaks video game conventions by changing the protagonist for one battle, so that you can feel what it's like when prejudice is no longer holding you back. This is the only time in the entire game that you fight Reen, who is the player character, and that's what made this so profound. It isn't just that Trails of Cold Steel portrayed prejudice in a realistic way, and it isn't just that this game showed us how to overcome it. Trails of Cold Steel used gameplay mechanics to reinforce its themes that prejudice and unconscious bias may seem small, but if we aren't careful, then something that seems small can hold us back from our true potential. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Check out the links to Heartwell, Discord, and Twitch in the description. And remember, persistence pays off, both in games and in life. Thanks for watching.